When I came home from prison in Afghanistan, my 9-year-old asked, "Who are you?" After 9 long years of uncertainty, I was finally out. The heavy metal doors of the prison clanged shut behind me, marking the end of an agonizing chapter in my life. But as much as I wanted to feel freedom in my bones, something gnawed at my gut, something I couldn't quite shake. My son, Jason. He was just a child when I was locked away. He was only 5 years old when I was taken, and I had no idea how much he had changed, how much our family had shifted without me. You see, I wasn't just an inmate, I was an unintentional exile from the life I once knew. When I was arrested by the Afghan military, it wasn't for any crime I had committed in the traditional sense. It was a misunderstanding, a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I had been gathering geological data for my PhD research when the military took me, accusing me of espionage. They believed I was working for foreign agencies. My American background didn't help my cause. Even though I was innocent, no one believed me, and so I spent 9 years in a prison cell, isolated, with nothing but my thoughts and the occasional bits of food they would throw my way. The worst part wasn't the loneliness. It wasn't the rats or the cold or the hunger. It was the fact that I was missing out on watching my son grow up. Jason, my only child, was out there, living a life I couldn't be part of. I missed his first day of school, his first broken heart, his victories, his failures. Over the years I kept a mental image of him, trying to hold on to the boy I had left behind. And when I could, I clung to the hope that, somehow, someday I would be reunited with him. The years dragged on, but I kept telling myself that the research I had sacrificed my life for would be worth it. But as the day of my release finally arrived, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. How would Jason react to seeing me again? How much had he changed? When I stepped off the bus that had taken me from the prison gates, the world around me felt different. Afghanistan had changed, and so had I. My body was thinner than it used to be, my face roughened by the years, but my mind was sharp. My heart raced as the weight of the situation began to sink in. I was finally going to see my family, but there was something about the unknown that terrified me. I wasn't sure what to expect when I walked into the house. My wife Ezra was there to meet me, her face a mixture of joy and relief. But the biggest shock came when I walked in and saw Jason, my 9-year-old son, standing in the living room staring at me. "Who are you?" Jason asked, his voice flat, confused. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This was my son, the boy I had dreamed of seeing again. But he didn't recognize me. He didn't know me. My heart dropped to my stomach as I tried to force a smile, to say something, but the words got caught in my throat. "Jason," I said softly, my voice shaking, "it's Sep's your dad. I Sep been gone for a long time, but I Sep been back now." Jason's eyes darted from me to his mother, then back at me, still unsure. The recognition wasn't there. "I don't know you," Jason said again, his tone more uncertain now. Are you really my dad?" The sting of that question hit me harder than anything else I had endured in my years away. How had I allowed myself to become a stranger to my own son? Ezra stepped forward, pulling him into her arms. I could see her eyes welling up with tears, her guilt and sorrow mixing with relief. "Jason, this is your dad," she said softly. "He's been away for a long time. Set's the one who—" But I couldn't hear her anymore. I was drowning in my own pain. The pain of realizing just how much time I had lost, how much of my life I had sacrificed for this moment. Jason was no longer the 5-year-old I remembered. He was a boy who had grown up without me, without any real memory of who I was. I stood there rooted to the spot, as a lump formed in my throat. My mind raced with thoughts of what could have been. How different could things have been if I hadn't been dragged away all those years ago? How much of my son's life had I missed, and how much would I continue to miss? In that moment I felt like an outsider, like a ghost haunting the edges of my own family. I tried to force a connection to bridge the gap that had grown between us, but it was clear I wasn't the same person to him. I wasn't the dad who had been there for his first steps, his first words, his first days at school. As I stood there feeling the full weight of my absence, Ezra pulled me aside. She whispered softly, her voice trembling, "Give him time, love. He'll come around. But you need to be patient. This isn't just about you coming back, it's about him accepting you again." It wasn't the comfort I wanted, but it was all I could ask for. I nodded and sat down in the living room as Ezra continued to comfort Jason, trying to explain things in a way he could understand. But I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. My son didn't know who I was. How could I possibly rebuild a relationship with him after so much time had passed? How could I prove that I was still the man he needed me to be? That night, after we all sat down to a quiet dinner, I couldn't shake the question from my mind: would Jason ever truly see me as his father again? Or had I lost him forever? The days that followed felt like a blur. Jason wasn't angry with me. He was just distant. I watched him play with his toys, sit at the dinner table, and speak to Ezra with a familiarity that stung my chest. It was as if I had always been a shadow in his life. His eyes would occasionally drift toward me, but they were filled with curiosity, not the recognition I longed for. It wasn't just Jason. Ezra, too, seemed like a distant memory. I hadn't realized how much things had shifted while I was away. She had become a mother, a protector, and a single parent. Our bond had been strained by time and absence, but I could still see the glimmers of the woman I had once known in her eyes. The hurt she had carried for 9 years was obvious. I hadn't expected it, but I could see it now, in every word she spoke, in every glance she threw my way. The house felt unfamiliar to me. The walls seemed to echo with the absence of the man I used to be. The familiar furniture, the creaking floors, the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen, everything had changed without me. As much as I wanted to be angry at Jason for not recognizing me, I knew I couldn't be. He had only known me through a distant memory. I was a shadow to him, not a father, and I wasn't sure how to fix that. How do you regain something that has been lost for so long? Ezra kept encouraging me, urging me to be patient, to give Jason time.
He's just a kid, Max,
She would say.
He doesn't understand the situation.
Give him time to process. But the time was slipping through my fingers, and every second that passed made me feel more and more like an outsider. I spent the next few days trying to reconnect with Jason, but the distance between us was palpable. I started small, offering him his favorite snacks, asking him about his day, trying to participate in his games. But it was like I was speaking a foreign language. He was polite, but the warmth I had expected was absent. The hardest moment came one evening when Jason came into the living room after dinner. He stood in front of me, looking at me with those eyes that held no recognition. "Can I ask you something?" he asked. "Of course, Jason," I said, my voice soft, trying to keep the emotions in check. "What's on your mind?" He fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, clearly hesitant. "Why did you go away for so long?" The question hit me like a hammer. It was simple, honest, and raw.
It felt like he was asking me to explain the years I had lost, to justify the absence that had defined his childhood. How could I answer him?
How could I make him understand that I had been taken away against my will, locked in a foreign prison with no hope of escape? "I didn't want to leave you, Jason," I said softly, my heart heavy. "I never wanted to be away from you or your mother. I was doing something important, something I believed could make a difference. But I was wrong. I should have been here with you." Jason blinked, his eyes searching mine for answers. I could see the confusion there, but also a hint of curiosity. But before I could say more, Ezra stepped in. "Jason," she said gently, "your dad did what he had to do, and he sets here now. Let's not rush things, okay?" Jason nodded, but the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He was trying, but I wasn't the father he remembered. I wasn't the person who had tucked him in at night or read him bedtime stories. I was just someone who had come back from the past, someone who didn't belong. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, too quiet. My mind raced with thoughts of the past. I remembered the way Jason used to cling to me when he was younger, the way he would run to me every time I came home from work. That child was gone. In his place stood a stranger, and I had no idea how to reach him. I couldn't help but wonder, how long would it take for him to forgive me for leaving? Would he ever see me as the dad he used to love, or would I forever be the stranger in his life? The next day I made a decision. I had to do something drastic if I wanted to reconnect with Jason. I couldn't sit around and wait for him to come to me. I needed to show him who I really was. The father he had lost, the man who had sacrificed everything to give him a better future. Ezra had been right about one thing: patience was key, but so was action. I decided to take him to the park. Just the two of us. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it was a start. It was a chance to rebuild, to show him that I was still the same person underneath the years of separation. When I told Jason I wanted to take him to the park, he hesitated for a moment. I could see the reluctance in his eyes. But then he nodded, and we headed out the door. The walk to the park was quiet at first, with neither of us saying much. But as we reached the swings, something shifted. Jason tentatively climbed onto the swing next to me, his eyes scanning the area. I pushed off the ground, gaining momentum, and he followed my lead. For the first time since I had returned, Jason smiled at me. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a glimmer of hope in the dark, a tiny spark that I clung to. As we played, I told him stories about when he was younger, stories about how I used to take him to the park, how he used to love to swing as high as he could go. I could see the faint flicker of recognition in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as far removed as I had thought. But then as the sun began to set, Jason stopped swinging and turned to face me. "I don't remember a lot of it," he said quietly, his voice small. "I don't remember you being there." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I know, Jason. I know it's such been a long time, but I such been here now and I such been not going anywhere." Jason didn't say anything, but he gave me a small nod. It was a step, a small one, but it was progress. The ride home was quieter, and as we walked through the front door, Jason asked something that surprised me. "Can I show you something?" "Of course," I said, following him to his room. He opened a drawer and pulled out a photo album. He flipped through it slowly, showing me pictures of himself, of Ezra, of the family vacations they'd had. But when he got to a photo of me, taken when I was still around, he stopped. "Who's this?" he asked, pointing to a picture of me holding him when he was just a baby. "You look like my dad, but I don't remember this." The question hit me hard, and I had to swallow the lump in my throat. This was it, the moment that would define whether or not we could truly rebuild. "I was your dad," I said softly, my voice breaking slightly. "I still am, I just had to leave for a while." Jason looked at me for a long moment, his young mind processing everything. Finally, he closed the album and looked me in the eyes. "I want to remember you, Dad," he said quietly. "I want to, but it's gonna take time." I smiled through the tears that threatened to spill.
I'm sure I'll still wait, like Jason. I shall wait as long as it takes.
And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was finally starting to find my way back to my son. The next few weeks felt like a delicate balancing act. I had been back in Jason and Ezra's lives for a month now, but I could still feel the gap between us. Jason and I were growing closer, but it wasn't without its challenges. He was warming up to me in ways that brought hope, but there were still moments of distance, moments when I could feel the hesitation in his eyes, as though he was waiting for me to disappear again. As for Ezra, I could tell that she was still processing everything. There was a quiet tension in our conversations, like we were both unsure of how to pick up where we left off. But despite the awkward silences and the lingering hurt, we were making progress. I could see it in Jason's eyes whenever he called me Dad instead of the stranger I had been to him. I could hear it in Ezra's voice when she spoke of the future, something she hadn't dared to do in years. I was back, yes, but it was clear that I still had a lot of work to do on myself, on my relationship with them, and on the past that I had left behind. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table looking over some old research papers for the geological studies I had completed during my time in prison. Ezra was at the stove, cooking a simple dinner. Jason was in his room, and for the first time in weeks there was a peaceful quiet in the house. It was the kind of quiet I had dreamed of during those long years in that dark cell, the kind that I thought I would never experience again. But then, as I read through a particularly complex section, I paused. I had never told Jason the full story of why I had gone to prison. He knew the basics, of course, the investigation, the charges, and that I had been wrongfully imprisoned while pursuing my research. But he didn't know how much of my life had been sacrificed. He didn't know that I had kept my distance from him and Ezra because I had believed my work was more important. I had believed that research and success would make everything better in the long run. I hadn't known back then that the long run was a myth. Time doesn't wait for anyone, and the years I spent away from my family convinced that my research was worth the sacrifice had nearly cost me everything. That night after dinner, I sat down with Jason in the living room. He was watching one of his favorite cartoons, something that I hadn't seen before I left. I was still learning the little details about his life, the things that made him who he was now. The boy I had left behind had become a young man. He was no longer the child I remembered. "Jason," I began softly, not wanting to break the moment but knowing that I had to. "I need to talk to you about something important." He paused the show, turning his attention to me. His gaze was expectant, but I could see that he wasn't entirely sure what I was going to say. "I want to tell you why I was away for so long," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't want you to feel like I been hiding anything from you. I want you to understand." Jason leaned forward, his eyes wide with curiosity. "What do you mean, Dad?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself before continuing. "I was locked up, Jason. I was in prison because of my research, something I believed was going to make a difference in the world. I thought that if I could prove my theories, if I could just complete my work, everything would be okay. But the truth is, I wasn't just doing it for the right reasons. I was so focused on my work that I didn't see what was happening around me, what was happening to you and your mom. Jason's eyes softened, but he didn't say anything. I could tell he was trying to understand, trying to piece together the puzzle of my absence. I was wrong, Jason. I should have been here with you. I should have been a father to you, not someone who disappeared for years. And I'm sorry for that. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know that I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I'll be here every step of the way. Jason didn't say anything for a long moment. He just looked at me, his face unreadable. But then, slowly, he reached out and grabbed my hand. That's okay, Dad, he said quietly. I understand. You were doing something important, and I've been glad you're here now. I didn't know what to say in response. The weight of the past few months had been heavy, and now, finally, I felt like I was starting to heal. But there was still a long road ahead of us, and I knew that it wouldn't be easy. I had missed so much, and there was still so much to make up for. The following weeks brought more moments of clarity, more breakthroughs in my relationship with Jason and Ezra. I started to take more responsibility in the house, picking up where I could, helping out with chores and showing Jason that I was here to stay. Slowly, his demeanor toward me began to change. He began calling me Dad more often. He started sharing his day with me, telling me about his friends and the things he had been learning at school. There was still a barrier there, but I could see it weakening. One evening, as I was sitting in the kitchen after dinner, Jason walked in with a small piece of paper in his hand. He was hesitant, looking at me like he wasn't sure if it was the right time to speak. Dad, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I made you something. He handed me the paper and I saw it was a drawing. It wasn't perfect, it was a simple sketch of a father and son walking together in the park, the sun shining above them. Jason's rendition of me was crude, but the sentiment was clear. I wanted to show you that I remember, he said. His voice full of sincerity. I remember when you used to take me to the park, and even though I don't remember everything, I want to try to remember. I want us to have those moments again. I held back tears, the weight of his words hitting me like a tidal wave. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Jason had finally started to see me as his father again, not just a stranger, not just a memory, and it was in this moment that I knew everything would be okay. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real. The days that followed were filled with small victories. We began to rebuild our family in a way that felt genuine and honest. Ezra and I started talking more openly about our past, the hurts we had both carried for so long. It wasn't easy, but we were getting there. One step at a time, we were rediscovering the love that had once bound us together. And as I looked at Jason, now slowly coming to terms with his past and the father who had once been a stranger, I realized that the life I had dreamed of, the one I thought I had lost forever, was starting to take shape again. I had sacrificed everything for my research, for a goal I believed was worth the cost. But now, with my family by my side, I knew that the greatest achievement in my life would never be a dissertation or a published paper. It would be this rebuilding my relationship with my son, my wife, and myself. What do you think? How much I have tolerate to sacrifice my precious time in prison while doing my research? What was any other way to decrease my time in prison? What do you think about it? Tell me in the comment. I would love to see your thoughts and reflection.